Good evening and welcome to Thursday Therapy with the Counseling Couple. I am Seneca.
And I am
So
Carlos.
we are so excited for you to be here with us this evening. Um, as you can see, we have on blue, and we are going to be talking about a great topic this evening because the month of April is Autism Awareness Month. And so we are wearing our blue in solidarity with our families that have children that find themselves on the autism spectrum. We actually have a great panel that's going to be with us this evening, and we will meet our panel shortly. But before that, we wanted to make sure that we gave you some preliminary information about autism spectrum disorder. And then we are going to watch a video, and I want to make sure I get the title correct. It's Children of Color with Autism Face Disparities of Care and Isolation. And so that will set our conversation and actually be the basis of the conversation that we are going to have this evening. Before we move, though, to our statistics and general information about autism, we did want to anchor our conversations with the acronym. So, anyone that knows me knows that I love a good acronym. And so, as we have these conversations on the third Thursday, we want to grow as a community, our church community, our friends who are watching, our family, whomever is with us. And so, we're going to use GROW as the acronym to gain awareness, respect our differences, own our feelings, thoughts, and biases because we all have them, and then work to break the stigma by talking and taking action. And so, wherever you find yourself in the conversation, in this acronym, you are exactly where you are supposed to be. But we do hope that you take some things away from the conversation that will help you um, to help those that are in your sphere of influence and to better serve the community. So, Carlos, I know you have some statistics and some information for us.
Yes, I'm going to share a few facts about the autism spectrum disorder just to make sure that we're all on the same page as it relates to that information. So, autism is a bioneurological developmental disability that generally appears before the age of 3. It impacts the normal development of the brain in the areas of social interaction, communication skills, and cognitive function. And individuals with autism typically have difficulties in verbal and nonverbal communication, social interactions, and leisure or play activities. It's important to know that currently there is no cure for autism, though with early intervention and treatment, the diverse symptoms related to autism can be greatly improved and in some cases completely overcome. So again, early intervention and treatment is very important. Um, in 2020, the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, reported that approximately 1 in 54 children in the US was diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder. And according to 2016 data, 1 in 34 boys was identified as having autism. 1 in 144 girls was identified as having autism. So as you can see, boys are 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with autism than girls. And most children were still being diagnosed after age 4, though autism can be reliably diagnosed as early as age 2. And then finally, um, autism affects all ethnic and socioeconomic groups, but as we talked about in prior sessions, people of color typically don't seek therapy, and so minority groups tend to be diagnosed later and less often because we just don't seek those resources. So with those statistics in mind, what we're going to do now is jump into this video. It's a 10-minute long video, so we just want you to sit back, take some notes, and pay attention to what's being shown so we can go ahead and show the video.
African American family that knows autism firsthand and the particular challenges facing communities of color. Autism rates among African Americans are the same as rates among whites, but African American children are often diagnosed with autism at an older age, missing potential years of treatment. Special correspondent John Donvan and producer Karen Zucker have our report.
Here's how handsome this man named Jason Harland is, this 29-year-old who lives just outside Chicago. And it's his mother's thought, her name is Deborah Vines, that with looks like these,
Jason's going to be the first autism model on the cover of GQ magazine.
That's a dream?
It is.
Now, the obstacles to that ever happening may seem huge, because Jason does indeed have autism, of a kind that means he has quite limited language, so that only a very few people, like his dad, James, have the insight it takes for real two-way communication with him. Jason also has a limited repertoire of skills, like tidying up, which he excels at and loves, but in most ways, for meeting his own basic needs, he has to count on constant help from others. And then there is this other factor complicating Jason's journey through life. He is black. And when you're black and autistic, you face a set of disparities that significantly raise the challenges. They begin with the fact that when it comes to autism, diagnosis skews white. Neuropsychologist Laura Anthony puts it bluntly.
If you're anything other than a 7-year-old white boy, even if you're a 7-year-old white girl, you're less likely to be identified with autism.
It's in the CDC's own statistics, where the reported autism rate among black 8-year-olds, 13.2 kids per every 1,000, lags the rate among white 8-year-olds by nearly 20%. Among Latino children, the gap is even larger at 50%.
Tennis?
Anthony is a clinician and researcher who works with a lot of kids who have autism. Like he says, the undercounting of children of color denies them appropriate care. It happens in part because autism diagnosis is a judgment call on a child's behaviors, and inadvertently,
We have a bias, even though we don't want to, that's what autism looks like.
Jason, in fact, escaped that particular bias. He was diagnosed with autism at 18 months, which is actually early. Rather, it is another sort of discrepancy that has challenged him, which his mom illustrated by taking us all out on a stroll to where the Des Plaines River, north of Chicago, flows between two communities, Maywood, where she lives to the north and which is mostly black, and to the south, the mostly white community of River Forest.
Once you're in River Forest, the services for special needs is like the Holy Grail. The services just open up for special rec, for education, for advocacy, for ABA.
So compared to that way where you live?
There's no special rec this way. Oh, it's a dirty job, but somebody got to do it.
Now, Deborah is not a complainer. She is an agitator. There's a difference. The first afternoon we spent with her, she was setting the table for a gala dinner and auction in support of her own startup, whose name is
The Answer, Inc.
The answer.
The Answer, because so many families are always asking questions, so we want to be able to provide the answers.
because she knew firsthand, since Jason was little back in the 1980s, just how far behind her community was in being able to help people like her boy. That's when she had to travel half an hour by train to get to a support group, only to find that
I was the only African American there. And this was a, I would say, middle to upper class family. So they were driving Mercedes. They, had on nice jewelry. They had their children with specialized services, just an array of things. And I just felt really isolated.
Did you get a cold shoulder?
Absolutely not. They were very welcoming. I guess a lot of it might have been me. The fact that I had to go outside my community and then find out that you're doing it all wrong, Deborah. You're doing it all wrong. And it's because where you live.
Meanwhile, she also learned that her own African American community was not entirely accepting of Jason's difference.
Okay, Jason.
One particular church that we were going to, the pastor came and told me that a couple of people had came to him and said that they were uncomfortable, with Jason standing up during a sermon and being disruptive. He was being disruptive and things like that.
And James told me that isolation comes also from shame, which he admitted to feeling, and he started to feel embarrassed that his kid was not like his friends' kids.
Each milestone, they're talking this, that, and the other. And I said, yeah, well, Jason learned how to tie his shoe. Then you get these looks. He's 7 years old and he just now learned to tie his shoe.
What did you feel?
I literally got a warm feeling came over me from being embarrassed. And what that made me do is kind of withdraw myself, being honest, let me draw back. But I wouldn't say anything about my son. Eventually, I quit going to the sports bar.
That isolation hit other families in the community with autistic kids, and there were many. These are their faces. But they were cut off from each other, instead of organizing to demand more support for their loved ones, as families in white communities had been doing for decades. But this local state senator, Kimberly Lightford, says shame and stigma are only part of it.
I think the connection is just being underprivileged, underutilized, communities of color not receiving proper resources, lack of job opportunities that provide insurance. So you have families, they just do enough to get by, but all of those essentials, well, I can't go to the doctor because I'm on public assistance, or I can't go get this additional help just because I feel like I can't do it.
But here's what's changed around Maywood. Remember that gala that Deborah was setting up? Well, now it's the night itself, where she showed up, dolled up like it was the 1920s. So did everybody else. Harlem Nights was the theme.
Yeah, Jason is the man of the night. Actually, Jason is the reason why the Answer Incorporated was started, because of Jason. Because if I didn't have a child with autism, I would definitely support the cause, but I don't think I would be doing what I'm doing.
And these cut off from each other, here they were a big family together, out in public, proud of who they are, touched by autism, unburdened by shame, and grateful that Deborah started the Answer.
It's helped to educate the community, police departments, other kids.
I feel like I'm not in it by myself with the Answer.
Thank God, somebody, especially a person of color.
There's also a program called Just for Men, which James runs. Having long since stopped being embarrassed by Jason, today he feels grateful to have this man as his son.
And I tell the men at the meeting, I've learned how to love since I've had Jason.
More than ever before?
Yes.
How so? Why?
Because he loves unconditional. There's no conditions tied to his love.
The Answer has served 4,000 families in its 9 years, but still, it's a work in progress. One challenge met, however, concerns church. This is Jordan Temple Baptist, whose pastor, Stephen Richardson, says autistic kids, autistic adults, are all welcome.
The fact of the matter is, it's not our church. It's God's church.
Which means it is for Jason and his family, too. And now, Sundays are Jason's favorite day of the week, when, walking into Jordan Temple's foyer, he is greeted like this. Where his face is all you need to see to know how he loves. And where, inside, he gets to act like this, up and swaying, when everyone else is praying in their seats. The very behavior that made him unwelcome before. But here, it just doesn't matter, proving that acceptance does not take a miracle. Not perhaps like getting his face on the cover of GQ, but who knows? For the NewsHour, I'm John Donvan in Maywood, Illinois.
Wow. So we wanted to take a moment to watch that video to give some context to the conversation that we're going to have, because they are in Chicago and we have people right here in our community that are walking their own journey. One thing that we didn't mention earlier is that autism looks different in every child. And so there are no two children that have exactly the same symptoms. And so I am so happy to have the panel that we are going to have with us. We are going to go ahead and introduce our panel. So we have Ms. Taunya Crumbley, and she is a Faith Ministries member, and she's also a parent. And I'll have them give them a little more information about themselves. I'll tell you their names. And then we have Gherima Woldemariam, who is she works with me at Columbus City Schools, but she also is a parent of children with autism. And then we have Elaine Hamilton, who I met also along the way, and she is with us. She works for the Ohio Commission for Children with Disabilities. I hope I got that right. If I did not, she will correct me. But what we want to do is kind of get we want you to tell us about yourselves, but we also want you to give us some information about your beautiful babies that you have, because we want to know what makes them beautiful and unique and special. And so again, we'll start with Taunya, and then we'll go to Gherima, and then we will go to Elaine. So.
Go to the next, please. Taunya, disconnect.
Oh, okay. So, Gherima, we'll go ahead and have you introduce yourself.
Sure. And thank you, Seneca and Carlos, for having me. As Seneca said, I have the great pleasure of both working with Seneca and the Bings, but they've become friends and family of mine as well. I have 4 beautiful children, all that are affected by autism. Their ages range from age 15 to age 8. My oldest son, Sanai, actually, his birthday is today. So today is the celebration and the day that I became a mom. So it's a great day. If I were to talk a little bit about them, I would tell you that they are artists, they're dancers, they're mathematicians, they're scientists, and they are really who God intended them to be, which are loving, true and honest children. And I'm lucky to be their mom. And they are really my why. So thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And then we will have Elaine. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Elaine Hamilton. I am with the Ohio Coalition for the Education of Children with Disabilities. And my husband and I have 2 children. We have our son, Donovan, and our daughter, Malia, is RY, and Malia is 19 right now, doing really well. I'm so proud of the way she's done through the pandemic. Malia she's ornery, she's funny. I think she thinks she's a comedian. She loves art. She loves a computer. She's so good at the computer that she has been able to log me off and to where I can't even use it, so she can use it all day. But Malia, she's just a fun-loving girl. Loves art, loves computer, music. Some music she shouldn't be listening to that we have to kind of catch her and kind of steer her the right way. But she's a great girl. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for joining us. That video is really, really impactful. And we want to unpack it a little bit as we continue this conversation. So let's start at the beginning, and really I want to get your thoughts and comments on how African American or children of color are diagnosed in comparison to other children. Ms. Elaine, if you could kind of talk about that a little bit, what do you think about that question?
Well, it says right now, what I research says that African American or children with color are about 2 years later being diagnosed, but I think it's a lot higher. Having worked in the school system for over 14 years, parents don't know what they don't know. And like with us, we didn't know to go to a developmental pediatrician. Our pediatrician just said our daughter was going to have a speech delay. And that's what we kept hearing. And then a preschool teacher, they were amazing. They knew what was going on. They couldn't say because they can't diagnose. But they're the ones that kind of got us to where we were able to receive our diagnosis at almost the age of 4. So I think it's a lot higher than that 2-year gap that they're saying out there.
Thank you for that. And Gherima, you may have some perspective here also.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to what Ms. Elaine said, unfortunately, as people of color, I think we are used to advocating, more for ourselves in all spaces, right? It can be as basic as a grocery store. It can be in education in classrooms. But in this case, in the medical field, I know I can't quote certain statistics, but even there is, something out there that says African American mothers tend to die more, at childbirth. You hear all these horrific statistics that affect people of color. And so what that tells me, and that what should tell everyone, is that we have to, right? We have to be better advocates. We have to be more knowledgeable. We have to come to all fields with our game, with a higher game. And, you know, the video mentioned that a lot of these autism spectrum disorders are identified as behavioral disorders. How many times have you all seen that, right? Where a child of color is sitting on the carpet in kindergarten and it's automatically they're acting up, when it really can be, it's not developmentally appropriate for children to sit for 20 minutes, right? And so I do see a bias there, and I have experienced that bias myself in the medical field, initially with my son. The same thing as Miss Elaine said. He was initially we were told, no, he's a boy, he'll speak late. So we as parents always have to, unfortunately, as people of color, have to be more aware than our counterparts as other parents.
Taunya's back also.
Thank you for that. No worries. We are glad you're back. So before we move on to the next question, we do want to give you say thank you, Elaine and Gherima, for answering that question. And then we want to give you, Taunya, an opportunity to introduce yourself and tell us about your son, who is special and unique and gifted also. So
I'm Crumbley, and my son is Michael. Michael was diagnosed with autism when he was about 3. And it really came about because he needed 2 gentle years, and his dad, may rest in heaven, but had an early childhood background, so he knew he needed that early childhood development because he was delayed, and so we went ahead and proceeded that way, and then found out that he had autism. So we actually started getting early intervention services pretty early on for him, not even realizing that he had autism. It wasn't until, after he had been in receiving the services for about a year to 18 months that they discovered, something and did the evaluation. So early intervention is definitely something that I'm always, talking to people about, definitely do that because it really sets them up, for success later on.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And you touched on actually the second question, which it talks about research shows that children of color are not always diagnosed early on, and that their diagnosis centers around conduct disorders, intellectual disabilities, or adjustment disorders. From your experience, you just kind of talked about it, but have you witnessed outside of just your immediate experience those biases towards diagnosis of children of color?
I think personally for us, we witnessed the bias. The way that I see it was the diagnosis itself. And I guess I was always looking at it not from the point of reference of color, but because anytime I went anywhere, I see people of all color, right? But, or something trying to get assistance. But what I noticed is that it was the diagnosis itself is what I always recognized for. If they had a diagnosis of intellectual disability or autism, they were more likely to kind of like, struggle to not have those references tied to them, whether it was kind of, disorder or things of that nature. The word that was always used for us was aggressive, right? And so we were very, conscious in not having those terms and those labels placed on him, so that they didn't continue to follow him, because that's to determine whether the type of services he would either receive or the discipline he would receive, right? So it was like, no, there's an issue here, and we need to address it because he's communicating in a way that he only knows how, right? And not because he is aggressive. So we would, push and enforce that type of language and labeling would be removed from evaluations, from reports, from assessment, so that it wasn't continuously picked up from school to person to person.
Mm. Thank you. And you gave great perspective on labels and how that can impact you or impact your child in school. Did you have?
So, Miss Elaine, Miss Gherima, did you want to add anything to that particular prompt? Anything there?
I'll just say that in my daughter has a behavior plan, and I think that sometimes as she got older, some of the staff at school would see that behavior plan and automatically assume, this is going to be the way it is with this situation with her, is going to carry through, instead of getting to know her. Because with her, it's all about your approach and your attitude, and that's going to kind of determine the way things are going to go. And if you automatically have this wall up because you've read a behavior plan or an incident that happened 2 years ago, and then you kind of put that on her for the rest of her time, in your classroom, you got to give her a clean slate, because if you don't, it's not going to be successful,
Yeah, just to add, I'm sorry. Just to add into that as well, I think it is important to recognize, even though the disorder is with the children, I think that, the game changer is in the capacity of the parent. And so I think in our, in the district in which I teach, for example, there are parents who have recognized that they are the customer, and that the service that's being offered to their children, they are the customer of that service. And they know through maybe their own privilege and their own background, whether it was socioeconomic status, race, whatever it might be, they know that they have a right to go back and question the IEP team. They have a right to question the doctors. They know that, they recognize that, and that's a privilege in and of itself. Sometimes as people of color, as immigrants and other vulnerable groups, we don't always know that that is our right. And that can be a game changer for a lot of families, and ultimately for their children, because then they know, oh, okay, I don't agree with this teacher, but I don't know quite how to say it. Or sometimes, as Seneca and I have talked a lot about this professionally, the way we say it comes off wrong, right? And they automatically label us parents as the trouble parent, or the parent from this neighborhood. Oh, these parents always cause trouble. When all you're really doing is trying to advocate for your child, but one population has learned the art of navigating that, and the other set of parents might not have.
I agree.
That's a great point.
Yeah, when you bring up the word game changer, Gherima, that's big, because, when our students are being educated, it's really a three-way dance. It's a dance between that student, the parent, and the educator. And if one piece doesn't advocate, if the parent doesn't advocate, that student can lose out. And so that's a really major point. I'm glad you brought that up. The next question deals with the rules that we have for everything, how we behave at home, in school, in church, etc. So, Gherima, I'm going to ask you the first one. Can you speak to how teachers and educators in general can have more empathy and compassion for the children who learn differently in their classrooms, and how the understanding the funds of knowledge that families bring about their child can help in that space?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. It's a deep question, a lot there. But every great relationship starts with that, a two-way game. It's reciprocity. And so we as teachers need to recognize that every parent, every child comes with a set of assets, right? We tend sometimes in special education to look at a child from a deficit point of view. Oh, they can't do this, they can't do that. We need to flip that on its script, like you said, the asset base, and get to know the child. All of our kids on here, we can talk about what motivates them, what are their strengths, what are their interests, just like a typical parent can do. It's really recognizing that as a teacher, and then starting there, using their motivators to help motivate them, right? But then in our case too, the reality is there's sensory needs, right? There's things that overwhelm the kids. There are different things that bother them. So you have to also accommodate and make accommodations for that. It is the law, obviously, if it's in their IEP. But ultimately, it's really building that relationship like you would any other typical child, right? And then using that as the foundation for your teacher-student relationship.
Thank you, Gherima. Thank you. Miss Elaine, can you talk or speak to how you work to educate the entire school staff on autism spectrum disorder?
Sure. I start with the team. That team is going to be with her sometimes if she's in a intermediate classroom. She's going to be with them for a couple of years. So really working with that team, making them understand that they each have to develop their relationship with her, keeping that open line of communication going with the team in the school district. Even when I worked in the district, they often had us come over, even talk to the transportation staff, because everybody from transportation to librarians to the people in the cafeteria, they're going to be coming in contact with your child. So you really you're going to have to be diligent about going in and just maybe even setting up a training. I mean, that's what I did, professionally, but just any parent, ask your principal, can I come in and talk to the staff? There are different times when they have parents come in, you may be with the PTA or, try to find avenues where you can come in and talk with the staff and just keep that communication open. Because if something's going on at home, they're going to need to know about it at school, because it's going to trickle down and it's going to affect that child for the entire day.
Open lines of communication are so big. I'll go into a tangent. I don't want to go there. I appreciate what you said, Ms. Elaine. Open lines of communication are very important. Taunya, can you speak as a parent on how we can better assist our church family? And not just at Faith Ministries Church, but any church, to better understand autism spectrum disorder and how to support the children in our congregation that may be affected?
I would say definitely think of it, the inclusion when churches are looking to support the person, the parent, the family, the community. I would highly encourage to look at inclusion and making sure that whatever your plan is for the church, whatever your plan is for that program or that activity or that ministry, that you are including everyone. One of the things is they just want to, belong or participate. For my son, he wants to, belong to something that he can make new friends, because for him, everybody is his friend. So, I would say, look at everything, not just the ADA, American Disability Act requirements, like for, making sure things are, handicap accessible and things like that, but look at beyond that. I think it's helpful for the family who has a child like myself with autism that you're including them in the beginning and not as an afterthought, right? Not thinking about them later after the plan has already been built, after the ministry has already been put together, and how can they be a part of that as well? That is, kind of my recommendation.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Some great perspective here and information that you're sharing. So we do appreciate all of it that you're sharing. So we're going to shift a little bit and talk about supports, because in the video, the mother talked about leaving her community to get support for her child and being the only person of color in a support group and all of those kinds of things. So Gherima, we're going to go ahead and throw this question to you. And then Elaine and Taunya, if you have an answer, you can definitely jump in. But what type of support have you personally received for your children? And how has that experience been for you and your family? It's one part, right? Mm-hmm. And then where can a family who has questions go for support? So that's the other double hitter.
So yeah, there's lots of discussion, and I wrote down, my answer before because I didn't want to miss things. But, when you start this journey, right? And again, it's kind of, I don't know, poetic maybe, that today was my journey as a mom. It started today, right? On the 15th of April. And I didn't become an autism mom on that day. I didn't wake up and become an autism mom even when he was diagnosed. It was something that I had to learn. It's almost been like taking a college class that doesn't seem to end. You dig in, you roll up your sleeves, and you start doing research. In my case, this is my 20th year in education. I would have been doing a disservice to my own children. I've helped over 300 children in my district alone. So I knew that I had an obligation to find out what this autism thing was. So I dug in deep. This is not the time to be shy. At first you're traumatized. You see us now, we're all made up and done up and looking good, but you go through sadness. You go through the loss of what a life could have been for your child, or what you thought would have been a life for your child. And you have moments where you go there and you ask God, why my kids? Again, I think there's truth in this vulnerability that we're all sharing with you. But you learn these agencies that are the county boards of disabilities. You learn about these OCALIs that help, that are resources. The internet becomes your best friend. Parents and parent groups, those are probably your biggest assets. There are a lot of groups on Facebook and different social media where you can go on, because again, no one can give you better advice than someone that's going through the grind with you. But I will say again, and Carlos, you brought this up again, the game changer for my children, and I'm sure the other moms would say, is number one, don't ignore your gut, trust your instinct. The younger, the better. I know we as people of color really have a hard time with labels, but I'm going to tell you, with any disorder and any disease, I hate to say disease in this, but the earlier you find it, anything from cancer to any disorders, the earlier you can intervene, the earlier you can make an impact and change. So go with your gut, trust your gut, right? And even if you have to stand in defiance of doctors and medical teams, do it, because it's ultimately going to help your child. But lastly, and I'm sorry, you might need to cut me off, but when you go to these different therapies with your children, your child is not going to learn how to speak from 30 minutes of speech or 30 minutes of OT. Ultimately, the impact is made when you as a parent can find a tip, a tool, a strategy that you go home and you work on day in and day out. I drove my parents crazy. I drove my husband crazy, because we need to speak to him like this. We need to do, the more you can impact their environment and do more consistent work with them at home, that's when you see the biggest change, not just the 30 minutes of speech and otherwise. So, seek out people, seek out help, and then seek out community care. And I'll talk about that later.
Thank you. Thank you. Taunya or Elaine, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would say that for me, if I couldn't find it, I created it, and then I would sit on and volunteer on family advisory boards, got linked up with Children's Hospital, have been doing that for about 30 years, working on their Autism Treatment Network, Family Advisory Council, and in a grassroots effort, a friend of mine started Emerging Autism Solutions. And when I worked in Columbus City Schools, I actually started my own support group because I couldn't find one that was unique enough that worked for us. And it was wonderful. I met friends that I'm still friends with today, or they'll be lifelong friends. And those parents are invaluable. I mean, they have so much information. They're walking alongside you in your journey. So I'd say if you can't find it, I would say create it. And if you are linked up with the county board and your service coordinator is not working out, you have the option to ask for another one. And there are things, maybe there's a communication style that's different. You have that option to go back and say, I think I might need a different coordinator. So just speak up, just like she said, don't be shy. Speak up and trust your gut.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with them both. That's one of the first things that I learned in my research and figuring it all out is trust your gut, and for us, we definitely were linked up very early on. And again, because my husband's background was early childhood development, some things that we needed to, where to start. And so we were linked up very early on with Franklin County Board of DD. We had such a wonderful service coordinator that Again, you can't be shy to ask, right? Because we definitely asked, could we keep her when it was her time to move on? And so I said, all they can do is tell us no. And so I wrote to, their supervisor and the supervisor and said, look, this continuity is important. We need, to maintain this relationship with her. And we were able to keep her and still have her to this day. So she's been with us since he was 6 years old. So she really knows our family and she knows him. And I would definitely say the resources that we utilized was Ocali. I would go and volunteer at OcaliCon. If anyone happens to know what that is, it's a huge, conference for autism and low incidence. And so I would volunteer just so that I could attend some of the sessions that I couldn't afford to attend. But if I volunteered, as a worker, I could go to the sessions, right? And so I would volunteer. Like, you really do have to get creative, like Elaine said, and just create your own, where you don't see or, an avenue at you. You create it for yourself. And so I began to build relationships with people that I knew there, and then continued on. The educational service center was such a huge help for us too. But one of the things for me is my employment where I work at is Department of Education and Special Education. So I had folks that I could tap into there to ask questions and help us along the way in our journey. But every person was like that. So even though they were available to me, I still, sought our own resources, and and we still, looked out to other avenues as to what we needed to get for him so that he could become, successful along the way and to help us because, again, it is a journey. It is a learning experience that you get learning. And we're still learning. He's 17. He'll be a senior this year, coming next year, but I'm still learning.
Yes.
Yeah, so much of it is, you three kind of touched on this, and it's something that I talk to my clients about a lot. And that is when you come in to work with me, I'm only with you for like an hour out of the month. And so much of the real work comes from when you're at home and you're working as a family to practice those things. And so I really appreciated what y'all said that, yeah, a little 30 minutes over here is helpful, but we got to really put this stuff in practice on a daily basis and get little wins here and there. So that's really important. The video talked about, and particularly the dad in the video, it touched on that whole isolation piece and in some ways his levels of embarrassment initially. And so, families that feel isolated, families that feel out there and on their own, what advice would you give those families that are feeling alone in this, or who may not have, they may not know where to start? What do you have that you can give to those families? Taunya, I'll start with you with that question.
I would say definitely during this time it would be a good question because we do kind of feel that isolation being at home. He and I both. But if you're starting out, new in this, I would definitely keep going to your school and go to and do your due diligence on the internet. Right? There's a lot of things out there that may seem scary, but in the same respect, there's a lot of great information out there, right? And then you can start to build from there. I definitely know that counseling for us also helped during the isolation. He still is in counseling. That has helped us. He's in counseling and group counseling. So continue to do that. If nothing else, start there. If you don't know where else to start, starting counseling, and then try to build from there. Because again, the professionals out there know where you can start if you're just starting out somewhere, especially during this time of COVID, and then build on from there.
Thank you, Taunya. Thank you, Taunya. Miss Gherima, Miss Elaine, any additional thoughts there with the isolation piece?
I have the opportunity to speak to a lot of physicians. I'm sorry. physicians
No, go
about,
ahead.
working with families with all types of disabilities. And one of the things that I stress to physicians is talk, to your social workers so that they know if a parent's struggling. You might be able to tell just from when they walk in, because a lot of times it's hard enough even to get out the door to go to the doctor or any event or anything. And right now you really can't do too much. But if you are seeing your doctor, check with their office to see if there's a social worker that can come out to see if if they have any recommendations on things. And parent groups are one of the main things that really helped us get through, because we didn't feel alone when we found families that were just like us. So I think the parent support groups are the main suggestion that I would have. But if you can't find them, like Taunya said, do your due diligence and get on the internet and look them up. Talk with your doctor's office, talk with a social worker at the office, and go from there.
Yeah, I think there's two thoughts for me. One is what you can do for yourself, which is like the two ladies had mentioned, find your tribe, right? Find people that really fill into you and not deplete you. Seneca knows this about me. I am very unapologetic about my time and my energy. And I don't, give my time and my energy to people who deplete it, because there's so much that's needed to take care of our kids that I can't sacrifice that. But the other part of this too is, the individuals, your congregation that might be watching this, or the people in the community that might be watching this, I give you a challenge actually to kind of flip this idea of self-care on its head, because Carlos and Sana, you both know your counselors. When someone is down and out, it's hard to take care of yourself. It is hard to have that realization of, aha, I need to take care of myself, and I need to do, that's something that someone does when they're doing well, right? So I challenge everyone that's out there, think about it as community care. As a community, what can we do? And even though I'm not a member of your church there, what can the congregants do? What can beyond the church, everyone that's out there, what can you do to help push in? Because again, a lot of times we as parents of children with special needs, we're proud, we don't ask for help, but you do notice the friends that are around, the family, that you do notice when we're down. My friend can, when I pick up the phone, if my voice is not right, she knows. She's like, okay, something is wrong. What do you need? Sometimes it's just listening. Sometimes it is a positive or funny text. But those around you, we talk about when you see something, say something. It's basically that. When you see something, say something, do something. Respite care. I sometimes go to Meyer just to get a moment of peace. And my parents or my brother will provide me that quiet moment, right? So ask your friends who have children with special needs, what are you struggling with? Or here, let me make you dinner. Don't even ask, right? Just offer. So just really those two things I think would make a big change.
I love that. Community care. We do hear self-care as the buzzword, but community care is definitely important.
Yes.
So in preparation for, this evening, I was listening to a few TED Talks, and one in particular stood out to me. It was a TED Talk by LaShawn Hannon that in it, she said, when you have a child with autism, you have a family with autism. She also goes on to say, though, having a child with autism has made her a better person. Would you agree with her statement? And if so, why? And I want everyone to answer that. Elaine, we'll start with you, and then Taunya, and then Gherima.
Yes, I think it makes you more patient. You have to have some courage and some strength. And my husband's an only child, so I think, and I will say this, I think he was probably a little self-centered. So I think having a child with a disability, and he's probably hearing me somewhere in the room here, but having with a child with a disability like autism, you definitely have to be giving, empathetic, wipe that slate clean and move on with your day, and just come back with love the next day and keep moving. So it really does build you up.
Yes, thank you.
I would agree. Exactly what she said. You do have to. It takes a lot of energy, but in the end of it for us, I always have to laugh at something that has happened, or something that he has said, and just kind of marvel in the fact that you know no one else would have thought of that but him. He could be funny and not even be aware that he's funny, and just kind of look back at you and go, "What did I say?" But like you said, and when it's tough, you've got to be able to wipe that slate clean, like she said, and then just kind of, go go to the next day. It's a new day, So, and then and keep the when your child is your primary, is your child's primary, it's difficult because that's the person that they see, and pretty much are connected to the most. You have other family members around you, but mom and dad become the primary, right? And you then realize as they get older, you have to start to teach them, to be more self-sufficient, a little bit more self-sufficient, and I would say advocate for themselves, because again, they have to grow up and live in this world. I think I read somewhere or seen somewhere a while ago where it said, I didn't know that. I always thought that I had to, teach my child how to live in this world, but I didn't realize that I was going to have to, I didn't realize I was going to have to teach the world how, about my child. And so for me, I'm always big on that. I have to constantly teach everyone about him and not just about him living in this world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, the impact on my family, obviously, I'm lucky that I have my village. I call them my parents and my brother around me, my friends that really help me to walk on this journey. But the biggest lesson in all of this is it's really humbled me as a teacher. When you are sitting on this side of the IEP table, right, versus the other side. And, for a long time, I was on that side where we talked about other people's children going through this and other people experiencing. When I became that other person, you have nowhere to go but humility. And so it's really caused me to pause and think about, the basic beautiful things in other people's children, and how they would want me to treat their children. There's all this hype about testing and standards, and yes, we want our children, right, to do well academically. But I'm going to tell you, don't believe the hype. It is about really scaling back and really raising good children, raising good, honest children that help to take care of each other. I would love for all of you to help for your children to instill a love where they can walk side by side, all of our daughters and sons, and to be able to stand up for them and to be able to be kind for them and with them. That's really where it is, and that's where it's at. So it's in the small things. And I'll just leave you with, the best thing in my life has been, when your children don't speak until they're about 4 or 5 or later, when you hear them say mom for the first time, when you hear them say I love you, that's gold. There's nothing better than that. So that keeps me grounded and it keeps me humble.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Wow. It's a lot of good nuggets that were shared. Wow. So as we wrap this conversation up, any last minute words of wisdom that you can share with the group that's here with us tonight? Anything that any of you would like to share as we close out?
Just, you don't know what people are going through. You don't know what's going on in somebody's home. You will hear the quote, you met one child with autism, you met one child with autism. That's just like saying you met somebody with the name Kathy. You met two Kathys, they're both different. So just know that people, you just don't know what's going on with people, and be kind. I think that's one of the best things. Just be kind and treat people with respect.
Yes.
And
That is so
For me, I think if there are any of you out there that are beginning this journey, um, you are where we were many years ago. Um, the beautiful thing is with time and science and research and evidence, my 8-year-old now benefits from all that evidence-based strategies that are now happening. And so please be, you know, find yourself at least in that comfort in knowing that with time, there's more knowledge that's happening about this thing called autism, and you're not alone. Don't suffer in silence. That's the worst thing you can do. Do not suffer in silence. Tell someone, tell your sister, tell your brother, and then seek that help. Just take that journey one step at a time, because it is scary. It's not easy, but there is help.
Thank you.
And I would say I had a colleague, or not a colleague, but a supervisor actually mentioned to me today, and it really was, you know, very helpful to hear it, knowing it, and but also in hearing it. When you are dealing with children, all children, she made it come in. She said all children communicate with their behavior. So when your other abilities to communicate are limited, you are likely to utilize the ones that you have. So just remember that when you encounter a child with autism, because they're more likely to communicate differently. But recognizing that and paying attention is really, I think, beneficial just to us all, and not, again, just with children with autism or disabilities, but just all children communicate, with their behavior. So just be mindful of that and remembering that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You ladies are amazing. Thank you so much for just being here and for having this real vulnerable conversation. It's not always easy to give of yourself in front of a lot of people. And so I just really pray that whomever watches, whoever sees, if there's something that sparked a question, a comment, whatever, please just know that you are not alone. You see that these ladies have been traveling this road for a while, and so there you can get there one step at a time. But I just thank each of you for being here this evening and for sharing with us. We definitely have processed a lot of information in this almost hour, and so we will not leave a conversation like this without doing a breathing exercise. It would only be right for us to end on that note. So we're going to just breathe, and then we will, for 1 minute, and when you breathe, please make sure that when you inhale, you really fill your lungs for 7 seconds. And you want to pause for 4 seconds. And then you want to exhale for 8 seconds. Okay. And so we are going to play 1 minute of mindfulness breathing, and then we will come back and wrap up. But again, thank you, ladies, so much. So we are ready for the
breathing is so incredibly important. It's something we do every day. But when you really sit back and think about it and take that time to practice it, it helps out so much. It just calms the mind and helps you relax. So thank you, Seneca, for taking us through that exercise. Again, we want to thank our panelists, Miss Taunya, Miss Elaine, Miss Gherima. Thank you for all of the awesome information. We couldn't have been able to provide this information to the folks that have joined us without you being here tonight. So thank you for being here. Always want to thank Mike McGee for his support behind the scenes. He does a wonderful job. Thank you for all you've done. Thank you to Dr. and Sister Wise for just making mental health a priority at our church. We really appreciate both of you. And then also all of you that have joined us today. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again in a month. I believe our next time getting together is May the 4th or 3rd Thursday in May. We'll get the information out to you, but we look forward to seeing you at our next session. So thank you for being with us tonight.
Yeah, really quickly before we go, I did want to there are a few resources because I know that some people may need those resources. So the Answer Inc., Autism Society, Autism Speaks, Nationwide Children's Hospital has a Center for Autism Spectrum Disorder. OCALI was mentioned also, family and community outreach. And then Miss Elaine Hamilton, she has a couple of things that I wanted to shout out. She has a YouTube video, very quick about her daughter. It's Living with Autism, Malia's story. So she has that. And then she also has written 2 children's books about her daughter, Malia. And so I was really excited to hear that. And so it's Happy Being Me is the first book, and then Adventures with Lily, Traveling to Magical Places. So Happy Being Me, you see the visual there. And then the other one is Adventures with Lily, Traveling to Magical Places. So thank you for being this author here in our midst and for sharing your gifts, the gifts of your daughter even more with us. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. And until we meet again, you have a blessed evening.
Thank you for having us.